All set for US-Iran talks at Islamabad. American delegation led by Vice President J.D. Vance, that includes Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner are in Islamabad. The composition of the delegation reveals how much importance the United States is giving for these talks. Jared Kushner is not just the advisor to the Trump administration, but the son-in-law of Donald Trump, but he has stakes and interest in Israel. So, he is a Jewish descendant. So, however, his present Steve Witkoff is Trump's envoy to the West Asia. Vice President J.D. Vance was little indifferent to the war. Even President Trump said he was philosophically different on this issue. However, this is the high-level delegation that landed in Islamabad just a few hours ago. Then the Iranian delegation led by the moderate Iranian speaker, parliament speaker and the foreign minister have arrived in Islamabad. Both the delegations will hold talks with the Pakistani Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, to begin with. So, let me first tell you the context in which these talks are being held. The context is quite chaotic and it is not even giving confidence. Normally, any transition from the war to peace should begin with the confidence building behavior. It's called CBM. But unfortunately, the present talks are beginning at a time when the confidence is being deliberately shattered. The President Trump has been issuing tweets after tweets threatening Iran of dire consequences if they fail to concede or fail to accede to the diktats of United States and arrive at a deal. So, the Strait of Hormuz still remains largely closed. Iran refuses to clear the Strait of Hormuz. The war in Lebanon has become a stumbling block. Israel has been repeatedly attacking Hezbollah bases. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Lebanon is not part of the deal that US and Iran have arrived at. President Trump also said that the Lebanon is not part of the US-Iran ceasefire agreement. But the Pakistani Prime Minister has a different take on this. He said the ceasefire mediated by Pakistan includes all the places, not just Iran, but even Lebanon. Iran has clearly stated that there can never be talks, there can never be conclusive talks unless Israel stops its campaign on Hezbollah in Lebanon. So, this is the context. It does not inspire and it does not give confidence that a possible end to war permanently is in the offing. But however, diplomacy needs to be given a chance. So, that is the first part. So, what is the context? Second, there are substantial differences between the position held by United States and the Iranians' position. So, normally any peace or any truce or any deal is possible when there is some kind of a reasonable convergence. But unfortunately, there is an unprecedented divergence in the positions closely held by United States and Iran. Both the nations have taken a maximalist positions. We will have to only see during the course of talks who will blink first. United States says the regime change is no longer the core objective, and the Trump makes a bizarre claim that the regime change has already happened in Iran. He is again repeating the good old model of good Taliban versus bad Taliban. Trump says the present Iranian leadership is quite different from that of Khomeini-led leadership. So, he is trying to defend the US inability to effect a regime change through war. However, the significant area of disagreement still remains on the nuclear activities of Iran. Iran have long been holding a position that their nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. Iran was part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. When there was a US-Iran deal, which was called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was concluded in the presence of all the other permanent members of the United Nations and the European Union during the President Obama's tenure as president, Iran has agreed to have its nuclear establishment under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. IAEA is a pocket organization of the United States, and no country can go nuclear when IAEA is supervising its nuclear installations. But President Trump walked out of this deal and finally attacked Iran, even while the Islamic nation was claiming that it doesn't aim at a production of a nuclear bomb. Nobody really knows what are the real intentions of Iran. Notwithstanding all these claims and counterclaims, after the war, Iran says we will exit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. A bill is pending in the Iranian parliament so that the nation will come out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So Iran says no deal is possible unless its rights are recognized. These rights include right to have an independent nuclear program, right to develop its missile capability, right to protect its allies, which is called axis of resistance like Hezbollah, Houthi, etc., and also the right to have sovereign control over the Strait of Hormuz. Well, these rights are absolutely indispensable, says Iran. Iran also demands the future guarantee against aggression, guarantee against future aggressions. So, and Iran also says all its frozen assets should be unblocked or should be cleared. Many of the Iranians' financial assets have been frozen after Trump imposed sanctions. Iran wants all these sanctions to be lifted. Well, this is a maximalist position and goes quite contrary to the United States position. US says there is no compromise. Iran should immediately stop enrichment. So Trump says no enrichment. Iran says right to enrichment. America says, Israel says, Iran should not militarily aid its allies. They include Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Shia militia in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen. So the US-Israel condition is that Iran should not support them. On the contrary, Iran condition is that their allies, which are called axis of resistance by Iran and axis of evil by the West, should not be attacked. So again, complete divergence in the positions. So these are the very, very thorny issues. Iran says it has a right to develop its own missiles. On the contrary, US and Israel say that its military capability should be significantly capped. So the Strait of Hormuz was free. There was free navigation before the war. Now after the war, Iran recognized Iran actually discovered its ability to hold the world to ransom using its power on Strait of Hormuz. So Iran says Strait of Hormuz will not be like what it was before the war. So Iran says it will even impose toll tax to compensate for the war losses. Otherwise, Iran says the US and Israel should pay for the damages due to their unilateral war. So let's see what will happen. Iran wants to impose 2 million toll tax on the ships passing through Strait of Hormuz, and it wants to share this money with Oman. Well, you all know Strait of Hormuz is an important shipping choke points, a narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman, which accounts for nearly 20% of the world's energy supplies. So therefore, Iran wants to weaponize Strait of Hormuz. So therefore, if you look at all these demands and the positions and counter positions, we find it extremely difficult. So the question comes is, who will come down, who will compromise, who will blink first? And moreover, the talks are being held in Islamabad, a nation that completely lacks any credibility and legitimacy to conduct such a high profile diplomatic activity. Iran suspects Pakistan to be stooge in the hands of the United States. Israel is completely hostile to Pakistan. The Pakistani Defense Minister Qaza Asif described Israel as the evil and the curse of humanity. Reports indicate that the Asim Munir, the field marshal, has castigated the defense minister. That's how the Pakistan works. And so, defense minister is subservient to the army chief. Whatever may be the reason, Pakistan doesn't like Israel. Iran doesn't believe in Pakistan. Pakistan is often considered as American puppet. So how can it how can it play a mediator role with respect and regard? But the world has no other option after our Vishwaguru, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, deliberately opted out of this wonderful opportunity. In fact, the talks should have taken place in New Delhi. J.D. Vance-led delegation should have arrived in New Delhi. But Narendra Modi's short-sighted foreign policy, wherein India closely aligned with Israel, that too at the hour of war, has completely damaged India's credibility and India's neutrality in this vital period. This is a region which is very, very strategically important for India. Quite unfortunately, Modi government foreign policy has made India almost non-existent in this process. We have seen Modi government celebrating G20 summit, which is an annual routine event as a big jamboree, as if it was a reflection of India's status as Vishwaguru. But when the world is passing through such a significant period in history, India is completely missing in this hour of crucial diplomacy.